Okay, I wanted to go over an array of tools that I use on a regular basis that seems to give me basically the best results for the least amount of effort when it comes to page speed and asset management in order to deliver the page and the contents to the viewer. So we're going to be using my current website as of, let's see, this is May 13th, 2018, and there's no optimizations done here at all. There's not much on here. There's some pictures, there's some text and links, and then down here I have remote embeds from my Instagram feed. So what does this look like from a machine view? In Chrome, just hit F12 on your keyboard. This is probably your default view. This is the elements of your page. What you want to do here, go to Network. Click here to clear the current page history. You want to make sure that you are on the large request rows here, which is in blue, and you want Disable Cache. Now with this view open, you'll be able to right-click on your reload button and do a hard reload, or Control-Shift-R. All the assets that make up the page will be directly called in a fresh fashion. None of your original page cache that's in your browser will be used. So you can see here, these are all the little bits that make up this page beyond the base page itself. So you'll see there's each image, all the different JavaScripts, all the different CSS files, everything is its own unique entity. Down here in the bottom, you can see there's 58 requests. There are 2.1 megabytes total, and it took about 4.75 seconds just to finish loading these assets. That's pretty bad. That's not good. In order to make this better and to basically track the metrics of it, go to a site called gtmetrics.com. This is a free service, and you can analyze a website and see what its performance is. Create a free account. It's totally worth having. I'm going to log into mine here. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to do my own site. This is a very popular service, so often it does take a lot of time. There we go, proof in the pudding that this needs to be fixed. Over here, you'll see the page speed score. This is Google's scoring that they assign to different sites for optimization. YSlow is from Yahoo. It's a little bit deprecated these days, but it's still as valuable as kind of a second opinion. Down here, these are all the page speeds. These are the things that Google says, okay, you need to pay the most amount of attention to as a priority list. Enable gzip compression. That is basically zipping all the assets as they're sent to the end user. And that's done as a server-side mechanic that we need to get into place. Minifying JavaScript, minifying the CSS. This is also basically a server-side thing of where instead of having just a CSS file with rule after rule after rule, it's all made as compact and as physically small as can be. Browser caching. This is also important basically just to make sure that the assets aren't recalled every time that the page is viewed. Here, this track that is 4.3 seconds, 1.85 megabytes, and only 38 requests, so some things it has prepackaged. Okay, so let's go through the tools to make this load in a much more timely fashion with many less server-side calls. Inside of WordPress, the step one, I'm going to activate this plugin Async JavaScript. Now I'm going to go to Settings, Async JavaScript. So we want to have it enabled, but for the first time use, we're going to go to the wizard. Once you have a GTmetrix account, you can create an API key, and this tool will work with GTmetrix to track what are the best possible settings. Let's do that. I'm going to open up this link here, and you'll see up here in the upper right-hand corner, my API key. I'm going to copy that, go here, I'm going to put in my GTmetrix username, paste in my API key, and Dallas. Dallas is always good. Dallas is one of the big hubs in the US for connectivity across the internet. Now that we have this here, proceed to step 2. This tool will now fetch the same results that we just saw. This tool is going through and testing out all the different possible configurations that it can support. Async, when it comes to JavaScript, is asynchronous, which means it doesn't happen necessarily in order. When you're looking at the code of a web page, you'll see that there's a CSS call and there's some jQuery calls. Well, these can be what they call render blocking events. So let's say that the third thing on the page is a JavaScript file. Well, the server has to wait for that call for that file to be complete before it can move on to the next thing. And everything loads from the top down. Async will say, okay, I'm going to go fetch this, but it doesn't have to be done before I move on. So basically it's an override for that order of operations. This is going through and testing async as well as defer. Defer is, well, just what it sounds like. It defers that call for that script or that asset or whatever it is until a later time. You can see here that there's slight variations in the score, so it's testing whether jQuery needs to be on the page as a core library, if jQuery can either not be loaded or it can just be pushed off as an end asset. Okay, so basically it's gone through and it's checked all the different configuration settings that it supports. I'm going to apply the settings. It will ask you to do this, to simulate the deferred mode. So open up that link in a new tab, and you can see, oh, this is what my site looks like if the scripts are deferred. And I notice that my Instagram isn't loading, so there's something wrong here. My site is not testing properly. So I'm going to close that other tab, and I'm going to try one of these alternates. Here we go. Now my stuff is all loading my page. It looks right. The script that controls the size of my header resizing, the color change, that's all right. Cool. It looks good by me. So back in here, I'm going to simulate async jQuery excluded. That's the one that just worked fine. So I'm going to apply that. Settings saved. It's saying, hey, it's detected that I don't have the auto optimize installed. Well, that's funny because that's the next tool that I'm going to be doing. I'm going to go back to my plugins, and now I'm going to activate Auto Optimize. Auto Optimize is a pretty cool tool that will allow you to compression for all of your JavaScript, your HTML, and your CSS files automatically. It will generate the most optimized assets possible and embed them into your page. So let's go to Auto Optimize Settings. Here I have the advanced settings shown up here in the upper right. Let's show everything. I want to optimize the HTML. I want to optimize JavaScript. Let's add this in to see what it does. I'm going to force all the JavaScript into the head of the document. That way everything is called in a timely fashion and nothing is left hanging at the very end. Optimize, let's see, I'm going to skip down, leave these as they are. Optimize the CSS. I'm going to generate URIs for images. So this is basically like let's say you have a little icon on your page. It will actually embed that as raw data into the page as opposed to a separate HTTP call to fetch that tiny little image. I'm going to aggregate all the inline CSS so that any rules that are embedded in the page, they will all be in their own little block. Don't do inline and defer. That's a whole separate category of interest. And we're going to try and inline all CSS. That means all the style rules will be embedded into the page so that everything shows up simultaneously. There's no delays, there's no flicker of unstyled items. It can make for a bigger original HTTP request, but it winds up being much faster overall. And everything here, we're going to save the aggregated script in static files, and we're going to optimize for logged in, which basically means that we're not going to use optimized files if we are logged in, because we need to see the site as it actually is in case we happen to be working on it. So I'm just going to click Save Changes. I'm going to go here to the Extra tab. I'm going to remove the emojis. I'm going to remove query strings. So if you ever look at the back end of a web page, you'll see sometimes that, oh, something has a tool.js and then a version number after it, like v102.6. Well, we're going to remove all of those other strings just because they wind up being redundant. Let's see, Google fonts. Most every site that you're going to work on in WordPress is going to use some sort of a Google font. Those can be kind of render blockers where basically the whole site won't render properly unless those assets are fetched first. So we're going to combine all the requests for the different fonts we're using and make sure that they're put into the head. Now, let's just click Save Changes. And that's pretty much it. you'll see up in the top bar, Auto Optimize. This is the status of everything that's gone through, and it's found so far 3.23 megabytes of stuff over 31 files that it's combined to be as minimized as possible. But now that we have Auto Optimize installed, we need to go back to Async JavaScript. Async JavaScript and Auto Optimize are now actually managed by the same person, this Frank Goossens. So let's go back to our settings, Async JavaScript. Down at the very bottom, you'll see Async JavaScript for plugins, where we want it to work with Auto Optimized. Just going to click Save. There we go. If you click on Status, you can see what everything is doing right now. So we have both Async JavaScript and Auto Optimize done. Let's go back to our plugins. Down to Lazy Load. Lazy Load is a pretty cool little library, and what it does is that it will prevent images from loading unnecessarily. There's no settings here, just click Activate. So how you'll see it work is that sometimes you'll load a website, and then as you scroll down, the images pop in. Well, that's actually what lazy loading is. All the image calls that are off the screen at the current time are not loaded yet, so you have reduced HTTP calls made at the time of first view. Okay, on down to WP Disable. What this does is it actually goes through and you can disable a ton of native WordPress functions that usually most people actually don't need, much less want. So let's activate. And over here on the sidebar, you'll see a new option called optimization.io. So here's a big old list of things that we can disable or leave enabled. Disable emojis. I don't need the native WordPress emojis. Remove query strings. This is a double down on the previous tools. It just makes sure that different JavaScript libraries don't have their tails loaded on. Embeds is to prevent your site from being embedded into someone else's, if someone's trying to hijack your site or something like that. External fonts, these we can leave as off because we are definitely handling those through Auto Optimize. Disable Google Maps, very handy. The Google Maps library is very large, so you only want it to load exactly on the pages where it's needed. Like let's say you have a contact page. Well, you want it to load there. So we're going to have it disabled here, and then we need the page IDs where we want it. Like for instance, let's say that on my site, I know I wanted it on my home page, but that's the only place where I wanted a map to show, or on my contact page, something like that. Well, we need to find the post ID. What we're going to do is we're just going to right click, click Inspect, and you'll see up here in the body, there's a tag here, or a class of page ID 3471. It's an automatically generated number. That's what we need. We need 3471. I can just put in 3471. That's it. Or if it's on multiple pages, I just use a comma, and I can put in other numbers. jQuery migrate, we can definitely turn that off. That's basically just query functions colliding with each other. Just turn it off. Referral spam, that's basically for link announcements from old web ring mechanics. DNS prefetch, don't even mess with that right now. Let's say that you have partner sites and all that, you want to preload in the background. Well, you can have the system preload those pages preemptively. It's kind of a jackass thing to do, so I generally just leave it off. We can double down, do Google Fonts and Fode Awesome asynchronously. So that's a definite yes. Disable the WordPress strength meter and dash icons, which are just annoying little embedded WordPress tools. We can leave those off as well. Tags, turn everything off. This is a support of very old functions. Let's see, admin, post revisions number. It's how many revisions do you want to keep stored? Me, 2. I mean, I'm not going back to a post draft that I did 4 months ago and 6 edits ago. I pretty much just copy and paste out of Google Docs or Word into my editor. Disable autosave. Like let's say that you're working on something and you kill your browser. Well, this site will constantly pull and save your draft as you work. I find it pretty handy as a just in case, so I always leave this enabled, which means that I'm not triggering this. Let's see, admin notices, all the stuff on your default backend. Author pages, if you need it, okay, but if you're just doing like me, I'm doing a solo guy website, I don't need an author bio page that's automatically generated. Comments, never have comments on a WordPress site. It's a spam magnet. You always want them disabled, period. Definitely turn off and then turn off duplicate names. This is basically just the Yoast tool. Yes, it's very handy for SEO efforts, but it does add some cruft, so this is basically counteracting that. Others, disable pingbacks and trackbacks, definitely. Your feeds, if you're running a blog, a news-heavy site, well, that having feeds like your an RSS feed, that's really handy because it's good for search engine visibility. I don't really have it, so I'm disabling it on mine, and that's about it. The REST API is just for other functions that aren't actually in this tool yet. So I have all of my changes in. I'm just going to click Save. So now we have our JavaScript treated, we have a whole bunch of stuff disabled, we have auto-optimize is going through and just crushing stuff. Let's see what GTmetrix says about our site now. So I'm going to go to Ultra Deluxe. And so this is what we had before, a 60 and 76. Now let's retest and see what we got. Okay, you'll see that Yahoo really likes our changes, but the page speed score isn't that different. And you'll see what the big holdups here is leverage browser caching and enable gzip compression. So that you do with a page caching tool. So WordPress is built on PHP, and the way that it works is that it essentially generates a web page every time someone hits your URL. Like for mine, it's ultradeluxe.com. If someone enters that in their browser for the first time, off a default WordPress installation, WordPress will be like, oh, I've got a page request. It's the home. I need this header. It goes and gets that header. I need this navigation. It goes and gets this navigation. I need this page content up top, and this section, then the footer, and then it assembles it all into a package and sends it on to the user. Well, that's really heavy, and that's computationally expensive. Well, your home stuff usually doesn't change that much, so why don't you just pre-build a page that's instantly sent as a first-time response, and then it's already built. It's pre-built, and it can just be delivered to the end user. So let's enable that. I'm going back to plugins here, all the way down to WP Fastest Cache. There are a lot of different cache tools out there. This is the one I like just because it's so damn simple. So now that it's enabled, you'll see a WP Fastest Cache option here on the left and up top. We're just going to hit the left here. This is most every tool that you need right here. Cache system, yes, we want it enabled. I'm using the free version. I have the pro version, but it didn't do anything more for me, so I didn't care. So the free one is just fine. Preload. This is very handy because we want it to start to generate that cache, that page cache, automatically. And we want it just to preload the home page. And let's do categories, posts, and pages. And it will start to generate in the background 4 pages per minute. Now, let's see, logged in users. We don't want the cache showed to log in users because let's say you're working on a post and you're embedding some images, you want to see how it's look. You don't want cached information because that won't update in a timely fashion if you're doing a lot of little changes. So we don't want to show for logged in users. Why this is here, I don't know. Don't show the cached version for desktop to mobile devices. Well, all sites are essentially, they're all dynamic content anymore, so it's the same content dynamically sized. Leave that off. New post, we want it to clear cache whenever a new post is made or a post is updated. So those checked. This will have the same settings, just clear everything. Let's see, minify CSS. Okay, so we have auto-optimize combining all the different CSS files from the different plugins and different tools and all that stuff. Well, this is going to go through and try and make that file as small as possible. So we want it to do minification and combining. It's a second pass on top of auto-optimize to recombine any CSS files. Same with GS. And here's very important, gzip. Make sure that is checked. And we want browser caching turned on. This will add very aggressive long-term cache timers to the assets that are being delivered. And then also disable emojis. We already took care of that in a different tool, but hey, I'm always a fan of getting rid of emojis. Okay, so we have our settings here. Click Submit. So now this is a very, very aggressive cache because we have auto optimize creating cached assets, then WP fastest cache going through and essentially double checking and re-minifying everything. Let's say you publish a blog post. You don't have to do anything because we've already told WP fastest cache that, oh, a new post, I'm just going to rebuild it. Great. Well, let's say that you make a style change. Well, that's not really a post per se. So let's say that you make like you're in your editor, you're in your theme options, something like that. Well, you can, if you make any changes here, you want to step one, you want to delete your auto optimize cache, wait about 5 minutes, and then delete your WP fastest cache. You want to delete cache and the minified CSS.js. You have to do both in order for backend changes to be seen in a timely fashion. So let's open this up in a new incog window. There we go. Check this out. You'll see that, where's my images? There's something interfering here. So it worked here, but it's not working now. So something that we've changed in there has killed something. So let's go through and double check and see what we got. We're going to go into WP fastest cache first. So let's say that we just disable it. Let's see what the difference is. Let's go in here. I'm going to do an F12. And I want to do a hard reload. Something in the fastest cache is messing up image loading. So let's see what we got here. As a test, I'm going to just re-enable it, and I'm going to do a hard reload again. Okay, so we know that there's definitely a problem with that tool. I'm going to go back and just double check. I'm going to deactivate lazy load because it's only those images that are being affected. So let's say that WP fastest cache is affecting the script that lazy load uses. I'm going to do a full empty cache now. It's going to clear the browser cache and then do a hard reload to re-pull all assets. And look at that. That was a big difference. So now everything loads. So we know that there's an interference between lazy load and WP fastest cache. Lazy load is nice, but it's not really necessary. So I'm just going to leave it deactivated. Because just on casual inspection here, yes, I still have a whole bunch loading, but you'll notice that I only have 32 different requests now, and a majority of them have to do with Instagram. So great, well that's 12 images plus all the different stuff here. Okay, fantastic. So we're also down to 943 kilobytes. That's under 1 megabyte for the full page load. So that's down, what, 70% from the 2.5, 2.75 megabytes that were at before. So let's redo our GT metrics. Let's see what we have now. Boom, 92%. We have an A on both. That's, we have 1.8 seconds for fully loaded time. We have 959 kilobytes on 32 requests. That's great. It's virtually impossible to get a 100% in both categories. Don't even try. On some sites, if you only have like one image, something like that, one feature image, and the rest is all text-based and colors, yeah, you might get a 97, 98, even a 99, but getting to 100, that's it's not even worth chasing. And you'll see here, like, okay, I was downgraded on this defer parsing. Well, I have some inline JavaScript here, which means that there's a script that's embedded into the page. It's not an externally linked file. Let's see, and it doesn't like my minified. So it doesn't like my re-minified WP fastest cache file. So you know what? Let's go through here and let's where's combine.js? I'm going to leave my JS alone. Let's click submit. I'm going to flush that cache. And now, okay, so I just flushed the cache, but before I retest in GT metrics, I'm going to go in here and reload the page in incognito. So basically, I'm forcing the server to create the new cached page, that compiled page. I'm going to force it to do it first before I go back to retest. Let's see what the difference is. All right, a little bit better. We have 96%, so okay, it likes the browser caching. So Google happens to prefer the auto-optimized version of the compiled JS and not the WP fastest cache. Let's see, optimize images. That's the only thing that I'm not scoring an A here. Oh, and look at that. These are all CDN, Instagram. It doesn't like the Instagram files. It doesn't think that they're well optimized. It's virtually, what, 9%, 8%, 4%. That's fine, whatever. If I took my Instagram feed off the page, or if I reduced it to, say, 6 pictures, that would be a marked upgrade because there'd be less of these different flags. Let's see, otherwise, all the native files, yeah, it's saying, oh, well, you know, if you re-optimize the images, you'd save 5% of the file size, 4 kilobytes, 3 kilobytes. I don't care, whatever. I've got a 96% and a 91%. That's great. You'll notice that YSlow often, you can't get it as high. It will always give you a major flag for not using a CDN. So a CDN is where you upload your images to a server network run by a service like MaxCDN or any of those guys, and then your images are hosted literally around the world so that it's physically closer to where your viewer might be. Overall, unless you're doing, let's say, 50,000 views a month, and I really wouldn't worry about it. That's only when you're looking at that last little 1 or 2% just to get the absolute best peak score that you possibly could to a widely distributed audience. Overall, if you're just doing work for independent shops, local businesses, things like that, you don't need a CDN, well, unless your images are way out of control when it comes to file size. But overall, if you've got just some nice basic images, nothing special, this is what, 800 by 800, something like that, it's not really worth chasing that much. But overall, I think that's a perfectly good score, 2.4 seconds. And this you'll find at sometimes on fully loaded, oh, well, right now it's 1 second. Well, then it was 4 seconds. Well, there's a lot of stuff going on that you really have no control over. And a lot of time what it comes down to, like let's say looking at my site here, go back into my network tab, I'm going to hard reload. Let's look at our timeline. Okay, so it took 2,600 milliseconds or 2.6 seconds for the server to do a full response and start delivering assets. So this top bar here is first call and response, and then here's the flow of all the information afterwards. My core data, that took 0.4 seconds to load. I can't argue with that. Do I wish my host was a little bit faster in response? Yeah, but it's not the end of the world. It's also in off hours right now, midnight Mountain Standard Time. So this is basically when a lot of server-side maintenance is going to be done, network maintenance. So, most people aren't online. This is when you're going to see some of the slowest results out there. If it was 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, well, that would be a little bit different. That's when everyone is going, when all the different hosts are going full game.